Hi guys, today I want to make a video about my recent trip to England and why I went there. So I started off a couple of years ago looking into the Uluru Statement, constitutional recognition, all that sort of stuff. And what I did is as I kept digging down deeper into it, I found the real reason why constitutional recognition is so important to the government. So the Australian government has spent decades and millions of dollars on constitutional recognition over decades. They've just thrown money and money and money and more, millions and millions of dollars at it. So the question is, why is this so damn important? I figured out why, okay? I figured out why, and the problem is that Australia's foundation isn't really quite right. So every nation state, every nation in the world has some kind of foundational story, and that talks about who the people are of that nation, what their story is, what's their go, what's their relationship with each other, what's their relationship with their land, stuff like that. Australia has a foundational story. Actually, it has kind of like a bunch of foundational stories, and they're not really consistent with each other. And that's because right from the start, Australia's built on a lie. It's kind of like a snowball of lies. There was kind of a lie. There was a lie at the start, and then more lies to cover up that, more lies to cover up that. Like the metaphorical snowball of lies. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. The constitutional recognition and the Uluru Statement and truth-telling and all that jazz, what that does not really tell. I don't think it's real truth-telling, in my opinion. It is more like just getting that snowball of lies, putting a layer of concrete around it so no one ever sees what's in there, just starting again like that. Real truth-telling would be dissecting that snowball and seeing what's inside. That's pretty much what I've done over the last few years. Just a project by myself, really, because I just want to know what's going on. I've dissected the snowball, and what I've found in the middle, like the first lie, well, what I think's the first lie. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's more lies under it, but what I found as the first lie goes back to James Cook's first voyage. And it goes back to what the British goals were in that voyage. When I found this, I was pretty shocked. I've got to say, I was pretty shocked with what I found, and I thought, oh wow, I'm going to write a book about this. I'm going to write about this. This is crazy. This is crazy, mad crazy. And I started writing a book, and as part of this book, I wanted to go to England to visit some of the places where some of these key events to do with the voyage happened. Now, I live in Germany, so it's not a big deal for me to go to England. Like, I just took a week off work and went over there. I just want to talk about what I found, about what this whole thing, why I think this what I found about Cook's voyage is so important. Because it's really the start. It's really the first lie, which everything else is built on. Once you see what really happened with Cook's voyage, there's a lot of other pieces of the puzzle that fall into place, like terra nullius. Like, where did terra nullius come from? In what's it called? In the Mabo 2 case in 1993 or so, the High Court overturned terra nullius, right? Terra nullius, what they say is a fundamental foundational doctrine of Australia, and they just tossed it. But the thing is, when they threw it out, it doesn't even seem like anyone was questioning where it came from. And I just wonder, this just doesn't make sense. Why would you as a nation state throw out one of your foundational doctrines without knowing where it came from? Wouldn't you want to answer that? It's crazy. I would think it's irresponsible to throw out a foundational doctrine, even if it is a legal fiction, to throw out something like that without knowing where it's from. It's actually amazing. It's like, Yeah, where'd Terranolius come from? Yeah, crickets. But when you go back and you find what Cook's first voyage is really about, this starts making a lot of sense, okay? It starts making a lot of sense. Anyway, I'm going to talk about my trip to England and James Cook's voyage. So let's get into Cook's voyage, shall we? The catalyst for Cook's voyage, I think, was the British invasion of Manila in, when was it? 1762. So in 1762, the British invaded Manila. The idea of this was because I think they got some bad intelligence about somebody who was living there. There was this Sultan of Sulu was the true bloodline Sultan of Sulu was in Manila, and I think the British thought he was in prison, and they wanted to go and rescue him, and with the hope that he would do them a favour of giving them an island so that they could make a port. That's what I think happened. The British had no intention of actually taking over Manila and running it, because it just doesn't make strategic sense. But I won't get into why that is. But anyway, they invaded Manila and they went in and raided the library. Now this library would have been a huge library. It would have had ship logs and charts and all sorts of letters and things going back hundreds of years from the Spanish, and it would have had a lot of information about the Pacific, because the Pacific for a long time was dominated by the Spanish. It was called the Spanish Lake. So the British discovered, in particular, they discovered the letters of Torres. Now, you know the Torres Strait is named after, what's his name? Louis Vaz de Torres. I think his name is Louis Vaz de Torres. So they found letters from Torres about this voyage that Torres did through the strait. They also found some more records of this particular voyage, and that is they found 5 charts, 5 detailed charts of certain areas along this voyage. Remember this number 5, because this is important. Now, these documents that they found, okay, they more specifically, I mean, this fellow named Alexander Dalrymple, these documents that Alexander Dalrymple found revealed the existence of the Torres Strait. The Torres Strait's important not because that it could be a little convenient shortcut for ships, but because of the doctrines of discovery and the principle of contiguity. So let me explain this a little bit. This whole kind of quarter of the world was dominated by the Dutch. Yeah, there was the Spanish in the Philippines, but it was really the Dutch neighbourhood. The Dutch, on most of their charts at the time, had this great southern land depicted in a certain way, and it was depicted as, we have like New Holland mainland, New Guinea, Papua, New Holland mainland, and Tasmania, or Van Diemen's Land, is all one landmass, one contiguous landmass. Contiguous means, or for landmass it means it's one land girt by sea, one land surrounded by sea. It's all connected. Okay, now this is important because in the doctrines of discovery, the doctrines of discovery are kind of like a game that European colonizers are playing between each other. And this game has rules, and it has rituals, and the rules change over time as well. But contiguity is important because when a European power discovers a land, that's the definition of the land, right? That is the land. It's the contiguous landmass. So the Dutch actually have treaties with natives, with locals who claim to have vassal states in New Guinea. So basically, the Dutch have treaty with New Guinea, people of New Guinea. Not really, but that's their claim. So they've got that. So this big, huge, Great Southern Land. They've got a treaty over it. Basically, that's what they would argue. The discovery of the Torres Strait means that they don't have a treaty over the whole lot. They just got the treaty over Papua New Guinea. They haven't secured. It means the Dutch haven't secured a treaty over mainland New Holland and Van Diemen's Land, which is thought to be one land anyway. They don't have a treaty over that land yet. So they've been in there, the Dutch have been in there for, I don't know, more than 100 years, 150 years or something. And they don't have a treaty. You know? And the British have now discovered this because they've discovered the Torres Strait. I hope that makes sense. Anyway. Now another important thing here is that the Dutch have claimed first discovery of the Great Southern Land. The way they have done this, they've done this in 1642. So in 1642, Abel Tasman, on his first large voyage, landed on the east coast of what's now Tasmania. He landed just like kind of near Maria Island there. They planted the flag. Abel Tasman's carpenter went ashore, planted the flag, and formally claimed possession of, quote, this land. Right. They didn't claim possession of Van Diemen's Land. They claimed possession of this land, which would mean this contiguous landmass. At the time, everyone was under the understanding that, well, Tasmania and mainland New Holland, mainland Australia, is one landmass. So effectively, as far as everybody knows, by the time that the British invade Manila, is that the Dutch have claimed possession of that big land, right? And they did it in 1642 from what's now known as Tasmania. So now, with the British discovery of the Torres Strait, it weakens the claim that the Dutch have over the Great Southern Land, because that strait separates the land that has a treaty over it with a land that only has a flag. Right? So the British come up with this idea, and what they want to do is they want to claim all of the land that lies to the east of where Abel Tasman planted the flag on the east coast of what's now known as Tasmania. Right? So if you take that point where Tasman planted the flag in Tasmania, you draw a big line down there, you draw a big north-south line, right? The British want to claim all of the land that lies to the east of that line, right? Because they're figuring that all the land to the west of that is Dutch, right? But the land that sticks over to the east could be claimed, right? This is the idea behind Cook's voyage. He's going there. Cook's going to go there to claim that eastern coast, right? Now there's another element at play here, and that's the longitude problem, what's called the longitude problem. So for like hundreds of years, sailors are sailing around everywhere. They know how to determine latitude, so they know how far north or south they are, or how far away from the equator they are, right? That's fairly easy to measure. All you have to do is wait till, I don't know, like midday, see how high the sun is. You can kind of work it out. Or you can find like the south pole of the sky at night, or the North Star in night, and you see how high it is. Yeah, you can figure out your latitude pretty easily. Figuring out your longitude's really hard. You need to have, well, to figure it out like really accurately, you need to have some kind of clock. Basically, you need some kind of clock to calculate your longitude. And for a long time, like, sailors just didn't bother. They thought, yeah, it's not really possible. And you can kind of make do without knowing your exact longitude. You can make do with like dead reckoning, just following the compass. Just go in a straight line. You don't really know where you are, but you know if you go in a straight line, you're going to get somewhere where you might be able to figure out where you are when you get to the other side of the ocean. Alright, so they made do not knowing what their exact longitude is. Now for this particular scheme that the British want to do, which is claiming all the land to the east of where Tasman planted the flag, if they want to do that, they're going to have to calculate longitude pretty accurately. Now it just so happens that around this time of what, 1760s, 1770, you know, like just before Cook's voyage, the British have basically, they've solved the longitude problem, right? This astronomer royal, Neville Maskelyne, he's figured out a way. Now it's not all totally original British ideas that they've got here. They've bought technology from other European scientists, like they've bought these charts for Jupiter's to calculate the motion of Jupiter's satellites from this, I forgot his name, a German scientist from Göttingen. I forgot his name. And they've purchased some mathematical equation, like kind of technology really, from Euler, from the Swiss scientist Leonhard Euler from Basel. They've also got the H1, the chronometer, the marine chronometer from a British man named John Harrison. So when I was in England, I went to where John Harrison lived. So I'll just put up some footage here of where he lived, what it looks like today. So Neville Maskelyne, the astronomer royal, he went on this voyage to Barbados. Okay, so when was this voyage? It was around the same sort of time. I'll just look where it was. Yeah, so in 1764, the astronomer royal, actually he wasn't the astronomer royal at the time, but this astronomer named Neville Maskelyne went to Barbados. And he was trialing all these different technologies that you could use to measure longitude. Some of these methods have, like each of these methods have their own strengths and their own weaknesses, right? But I think he found a way to combine them to counteract the strengths, or to counteract the weaknesses, so there's only the strengths. If you combine these different methods, you can really, really accurately determine longitude. With this voyage, accompanying on this voyage was another astronomer, and his name was Charles Green. So Charles Green was kind of like an assistant. I guess he was kind of like an assistant there. And he was probably the one doing all the calculations. Come on, let's face it, because he wasn't the boss. Now, so Neville Maskelyne and Charles Green, I think together came up with a way to combine these different methods of measuring longitude to find a really good way to accurately and precisely determine longitude. They solved the longitude problem, right? It just wasn't very practical for a normal sailor to do, because the way they were doing it needed a lot of maths, and you can't teach all the sailors all this really complicated maths, right? So Maskelyne eventually made this little book called an almanac, the astronomical almanac, where he had all these charts to try to make it as easy as possible for sailors to use these methods to determine longitude. Now this was a really big breakthrough, and credit to them, because they solved a problem that goes back a long time. And solving this problem can save lives, can really save lives, because ships don't get lost. They know where they are if they know their longitude. They're not just dead reckoning, just driving in straight lines hoping for the best. Now anyway, so this is 1764. The British have solved the longitude problem, okay? They're not letting on though. They're not letting on immediately, okay? one of the other solutions, which was one of the solutions to the longitude problem, which is the one that ended up dominating anyway, was the marine chronometer. Now, on this trip to Barbados, they were also testing the marine chronometer, and it's just like a little super, super accurate pocket watch, right? And it was invented by John Harrison. Now, the Board of Longitude, they had a reward for somebody who can solve the longitude problem. And the marine chronometer solved this problem, but they didn't pay the reward. They were delaying paying John Harrison the reward. And I think the reason they delayed it is because they wanted to keep it secret that they had solved the problem, because they were going to use it for this voyage to go and claim the east coast of New Holland. So the thing is, if they pay out this reward to the people who have solved the longitude problem, then everyone's going to know, oh, the British have solved the longitude problem, and then they don't have that like advantage of secrecy, right? The British solved the longitude problem, right? Now, no one else in the world knows this, and I think the whole point, one of the points of this Cook's first voyage was not just to claim that like little slither of the east coast of Australia, of New Holland, but it's also to show off, to be a big show off, and to show, oh well, look, we've solved the longitude problem, because we landed exactly on the same longitude as where Tasman put the flag, right, even though we didn't go sail down there. Now there's another element to the Cook's voyage which might be relevant here. De Quiros, this Spanish explorer Quiros, landed on this place which he thought was the Great Southern Undiscovered Terra, what's it called? Terra Australis Incognita. So this explorer at Quiros, he named the land La Australia del Espiritu Santo. Okay. Nobody really knew where this was. Okay, they would have known what latitude it was, because like latitude's easy to figure out, but they didn't know what longitude it was or where it was exactly. There was a possibility that this land, that this La Australia del Espiritu Santo, was actually on the east coast of New Holland. There was a possibility of this. Another goal of Cook was to go up the east coast of New Holland to this latitude that this La Australia del Espiritu Santo is supposed to be, and see if it's there. Okay, that was one of his goals. Now the British are working off Dirk Rembrandt's extract of Abel Tasman's voyage. They don't have the original of Abel Tasman's journal. They have a version. What they have is a like Cliff Notes summary version of Abel Tasman's voyage, which was written in Dutch, and then the scientist Robert Hooke has translated it into English. This is what's being used to locate the longitude of the Prince's flag. Okay, so in this extract of Abel Tasman's journal, there are 4 coordinate points that are in there. There are 2 points on the east coast of Tasmania, east coast of Van Diemen's Land, and 2 points on the west coast of New Zealand. Now the British have this idea that what can happen in this voyage that they're planning is James Cook, or whoever's going to be the captain of this voyage, can go to the west coast of New Zealand, locate this bay, that one of the coordinates that Tasman's given is called Murderer's Bay, locate this place called Murderer's Bay, and then proceed westward, and by the known difference in longitude between there and where the Princess flag is supposed to be. So it's like they're going to count backwards from the way that Tasman went. And then this way they can verify that they're at the right longitude when they arrive at the east coast of New Holland. Now, this is their plan, but it really stuffs up, and I think it ends up being actually a smoking gun to prove that this is what they were actually doing. But I'll show you that, I'll talk about that later, what the proof is. Now there's another theory that I have about James Cook's voyage, is that the ship, the Endeavour, was chosen first, and Cook was chosen because he had experience with this kind of ship. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't that Cook was chosen and then he picked the ship. It was Cook got lucky because he knew this type of ship. Now, when I went to England, I went to Whitby. This is a place this is a seaside village on the east coast of England. This place is one of the only kind of ports, natural ports, along a certain stretch of coastline here, and it was where there was a lot of coal. So at this time, at the time when Cook was alive, it was an export. Whitby was a port for exporting coal. So there were these ships, and they were called Whitby colliers because they carried coal. These were fat bottom girl ships, and they were designed to carry a lot of cargo. Another like kind of distinctive thing about these ships is they could be beached. You could put them up on the sand or on the mud flats. And in fact, the place where Cook stayed when he was an apprentice in Whitby is a little house, and it's right next to the water, and there's a little mud flat right outside the front of it. And the Whitby colliers, these ships, would actually come up and just park on the mud. So these ships could park on the mud. Now I think because these ships could carry a lot of cargo, and they could park on the mud, these two factors were why this ship, why the Endeavour was chosen for this voyage. The thing is, the English envisaged the possibility that they may need to stop and stay at a place where they shouldn't really be. They planned to maybe have an emergency stop on Dutch land and then accidentally stay there long enough to discover it. Okay. Now there's this naval fella, I think it was Hugh Palliser. What I think happened is the planners of this voyage asked Hugh Palliser, because Hugh Palliser was originally from Yorkshire, from where all this coal trade happens, and they asked him, can you recommend a captain for us? And he recommended Cook, because he worked with Cook in Quebec in Canada, so he knew Cook. And this is how Cook got the job. It's because Cook also was from Yorkshire, and he worked a lot with colliers before he joined the Navy. This is why Cook was chosen. It was because he had experience with the Whitby colliers, and the Whitby collier was chosen, and Cook was chosen to match the ship. Now originally Alexander Dalrymple was supposed to be the captain of this particular voyage to discover New Holland, and this was probably because, well, it was all his idea, but I think he stepped down for a couple of reasons. And this whole thing about, oh, he's not a naval man, was a load of, it's just a cover story. I think Dalrymple turned down the mission because of his associations with Manila, and the documents there. I think the way the British got this intelligence about the Torres Strait was a little bit shady. Dalrymple was spying on Manila. He was manipulating things there in not really a great way. He was trying to play these two brothers of the Sultanate of Sulu off of each other. It was a bit dirty what he was doing there. And I think they wanted to distance that, just in case it all came out later. They wanted to distance Dalrymple from this voyage to claim New Holland. They wanted somebody fresh. So that's why they got Cook. Also, another thing, Dalrymple doesn't have experience with this kind of ship like Cook does. So Cook was kind of ideal. Okay, here's another thing. In 1768, on the 5th of May 1768, Neville Maskelyne, who was then, he really was the Astronomer Royal at that time, and he was also a member of the Royal Society, he summoned Charles Green and James Cook. Both of these fellas were handpicked by the Royal Society to go on this voyage. This makes sense because Charles Green he knows how to calculate longitude. He's probably the most qualified person in the world, to be honest. He's probably the most qualified person in the world to determine longitude at this time, because he was on that Board of Longitude trial on that voyage with Neville Maskelyne to Barbados, okay, where they figured it out how to do it. This is why Charles Green is on this voyage, on Cook's first voyage, because Charles Green knows how to determine longitude, and he's very, very good at it. James Cook is chosen because he knows how to drive a Whitby collier, and I guess he's probably did some good work in Quebec, and he makes nice charts. You got to say, he makes nice charts. And he's not Alexander Dalrymple, and he's not going to have all this political crap backfire on him and on the entire mission.